It's time for a high-speed thriller in upstate New York. The Porsche Club of America Sunset Cruise makes its way to Watkins, Glen, and it's time to find out exactly how more than 50 Porsche GT3 machines will fly their way around the oval configuration here at Watkins, Glen. Delighted to have you along here on RaceSpotTV for all of the action, where my name is Arjuna Kankipati, joined alongside by Reese and Gardner in the broadcast booth. Reese, I think we've seen our fair share of action over the years here at Watkins, Glen. Both kind of intrigued as how we're going to get on. There are so many cars out there that at this shorter layout of Watkins Glen, it's bound to be fast and furious for the drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. We have got 52 cars in the session here for Watkins Glen Round 4 of the 2023 Sunset Cruise 2 for the Porsche Club of America. Third last round of the season, finishing up at Road America and Sebring. It's a nice selection of North American tracks here in the Porsche 911 GT3 992 car. And like you say, I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out.
And it's a fun little schedule, like you mentioned, of some of the funnest tracks, and Road America and Sebring still left to come in what is the brand new 992 generation GT3 machine that, of course, debuted at the start of this year in the real world and has been competing across of the global motorsport and virtual motorsport world as the drivers get to grips with the brand new design and that wide-body Carrera, of course, that has come to be seen. Qualifying is underway right now, and maybe counterintuitively, when you have this many cars out on the track, qualifying maybe is not that important in terms of where you start. It's more in terms of where you start to stay out of trouble.
Yeah, indeed, and I mean, even if you qualify badly, this layout of Watkins Glen is so fast and so short. The slipstream is what you're really looking for. You'll be able to stay in a pack, and you'll be able to make your way up if you have a bad run in qualifying. But that's how things look in the Q session at the moment. Mark Nistor on top. 106.9 is the time to beat.
And you can see the left side of the screen with all those different colors. There's a couple of different classes at play. We'll talk about those in a few moments' time, but the margins, half a second or so, is between the top 20 cars, and yeah, this is kind of what you expect. Open setup competition as well, so the drivers have the ability to really dial in the balance of the car, and therefore probably dial out some of the downforce as well to extract maximum speed in a straight line.
Yep, that's why we love Watkins Glen, and I've had plenty of experience calling races at this layout. The V8 Scops League runs around here every year in the V8 supercars, and let me tell you, they're about the same pace as the Porsche 911 GT3, so I'm expecting some of the same kind of racing that I've grown used to here. They are running the Cup layout, so it is incorporating the inner loop, which could give a little bit of difficulty on the first lap, trying to avoid those big curves. But you can use plenty of the runoff around here, as Tamer El-Barga has just demonstrated.
We're going to have a discussion about track limits at some point today, without a shadow of a doubt. Most of the drivers are done and dusted for the qualifying session. You can follow along by heading to timing.racespot.tv, but as the 043 heads to the line in that plaid FAF liveried Porsche 107.535, we'll slide that car into 28th, and only 6/10 off. Such is the competitiveness up and down through the field. Back up towards the S's they will go, and just building as qualifying continues to tick away. It does seem as though it's rather cool in upstate New York right now, which means as optimal grip as you could hope for, Reese, here in the virtual iRacing session.
Yeah, we are only just past 10 a.m. in sim time, so this being November in upstate New York, obviously things are getting a little bit chilly. That means that there's going to be quite a bit of grip available for the drivers out on track. Not that it's going to matter, because most of the corners here are fast and flat out, and there's only two real heavy braking zones into turn one and into the chicane as well. But GT3s have tire warmers. It's going to be nice. It's going to be nice out there. I wish that I was having a bit of a wheel.
It's not a bad combo. It's a slightly more comfortable, especially through that inner loop, than the Porsche 963 can be. We found that out in the IMSA Esports Global Championship, where Ian Chan Guven, unfortunately on cold tires, lost his car over those curbs, and the VRS Coanda number 92 found itself out of the race after the first 40-odd minutes of the race. Here's the look on board in through the penultimate corner as we ride with Chad Dick in the 930. Now, I mentioned there are a couple of different colors on the left side. The blues are the PCA Pro class, the orange is the PCA Club class, green PCA Sport, and red is PCA Challenge up and down through the field. They all are classified for points separately, but are fighting on track together, and so keep that in mind when you see some of the different battles. Dick slides his way up to 17th, but that's his qualifying done and dusted.
It is indeed, and not a moment too soon either. Only 44 seconds remaining in the session. What can Tamer Elbaga do down in 28th position right now? 107.56 is the time to beat, out onto the start-finish straight, and it looks like it's not going to be an improvement. Actually, very small improvement. That should, well, at the very least improve the time, but not quite the position.
It didn't actually count, so I'm not sure what happened in terms of an off-track or brushing into the wall, but such are the margins at Watkins Glen. No improvement there as qualifying's about to wind on down, and we get set to go for a 40-minute timed race with, again, 50% fuel capacity for these cars. Reese, we're going to see them diving down onto pit lane.
And the question is, when do you come in for that pit stop? Because you don't want to pit too early and lose the draft in the pack. That's the key to success at this layout of Watkins Glen if you're taking a pit stop. It should be an interesting one.
So as they get themselves ready to go behind the Porsche safety car, as is quite fitting, of course, that's running down towards the starting grid for the fourth round of the 2023 PCA Sunset Cruise 2. It's the East region here at Watkins Glen. It's going to be a 106.907 for Mark Nister to get him to lead us to the green alongside Enrico Gregorato. Gabriel Albano and James Franznik will be on the second row with Chris Braun and then David Glen behind them, the first of the PCA Club drivers in that orange numbered machine. Back in seventh for ED Ising Ring. For Kevin Yokel, he'll be alongside in that very green number 15. Peter Kummer and then Kim Frick, Rodney Campbell and Matthew Siddle round out your top 12 as we continue to run through what is a rather large field. Michael Patterson, Terrence Tong, Dean Chapman, James Huth, and then Chad Dick and Ward Preston round out the top 18 drivers and keep rolling through the field. Plenty of the plaid Porsches, Mike Matson, Matthew Yokel, Jeremy Hall, Jason Finch, Joachim Backer, that's a name that we know here on RaceSpotTV in the Precision Racing League GT3 Sprint Series, and then Sean Murphy will be alongside. We're only about halfway through the field. Robert Neville has some plaid on his car. He's alongside Mark Rondo with Lyle, Edie, and then Tamer Elbaga alongside. Ben Leung and Adam Gerling make up the top 30 and still going, not even 1 second through all of these drivers. Scott Bowers and then Lee Binkley, 31st and 32nd, 33rd for Curtis Crummell, and then Kenneth Eskeridge will be alongside him. Andrew Elsman and then Casey McDonald, 35th and 36th positions with James Legolot and then Antonio De Silva, 37th and 38th. Danan Fairburn and then Jeff Lashway, 39th and 40th, and then John Gibson and Patrick Gill will line up behind them. Still rolling through Mark Lacombe, Duncan James, Mike Sackstein, Carl Bachiri, Russell Elizondo, and then Charlie Ferrer. And still plenty more cars to go. Arthur Schwartz, Johan Nye, Lisa Eskeridge, and Jack Stevenson. And then finally Derek Dirksen round out the monster 53 cars. And I can take a breath, Reese, but not for very long. We're ready to go and almost into that final corner.
Oh yeah, iRacing Porsche safety cars going to pull into the pit lane from here, and then the start will be controlled by Mark Nister, who will escape turn 1 and the S's.
I've got to say, what a lovely livery on some of the Porsches rather, on the livery at the very front, channeling some Kennedy. Will be your driver trying to lead us to the green, but are we going to fan out 3 and 4 wide on the run down into the 90 as the PCA Sunset Cruise is underway? Oh, it's a nice tidy start for the most part. Couple of drivers taking advantage on the track limit, and there comes the trouble. Not one but 2 cars perpendicular and sliding through, and it's going to cause a major choke point. About 10 or 15 cars escape at the top of the S's, but a traffic jam behind.
Oh, that's massive. I don't even know where to start with who's involved in that. Spread across the track is Scott Bowers. and the likes of Ken Eskridge and Andrew Elscombe are trying to work their way through that. Looks like Scott is still stopped there, perpendicular to the racetrack. He is going to get going. He just he did the nice thing and let everybody go. There were a few drivers that went around in the first turn. I'm already seeing a few drivers in the pits as well. Rodney Campbell, Robert Neville, and Lyle Eady with Jeff Lashway as well. And just like that, we are at the end of the first lap.
And it's a good thing that the carnage is all cleared up as the drivers really fly their way through the wall and to the end of the first lap. Remember, 40-minute race, so we're estimated to get about 36 or 35 laps of running done. And already, look at the separation, the margin that builds at 7 cars at the front. And you get the sense that the replay cycle is going to take us a while, but there's so many gaggles of cars that have just built up behind. And got to wonder at this early stage, we know that it could be possible to save some fuel. Reese, are some of these drivers just going to now settle back into line and be a little bit passive for the time being?
Yeah, I think that would be the smart thing to do, looking on board from the number 13 of Gabriel Albano here, and just seeing how everyone's fallen into a line here. They are giving each other a reasonable amount of space. They're in range for the slipstream, but they won't be making any big diving passes this early on. Basically, the only passes we'll be seeing are when drivers make mistakes, and I think there was just one there for David Glen, letting Kim Frick go into the second last corner.
Oh, but there's
dear.
Gabriel Albano that's now off the track.
No.
Oh, you were just talking about staying out of trouble, and suddenly a couple of cars now drop off the podium spots, and the 929, the 39, and the 333 all now dive down through turn 1 as the driver out front sets the fastest lap. Mark Nister with a 107.675. Replay machine just getting more and more things added to it that we're going to have to spool on up.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of action going on there. It looks to me like Albano ran into the back of Enrico Gregorato into the second last turn, and that's the reason why he ended up spinning around. So now our top two have broken away, and third to seventh is in their own little pack. Here is a replay of the start, and this is going to be very chaotic, Arjuna.
Yeah, and so this is already, you can see bumper cars being played, and Antonio Da Silva kind of loses out there. I'm not even sure what else kind of happens at the front, but you can see them all kind of pile on top of one another, and it's never ending, and the poor Porsche spare parts department, it's going to be a long old evening for them.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I hope they've brought many truckloads of spare parts to Watkins Glen, because that was a very messy start in the midfield. Maybe this is the incident that triggered it.
Yeah, so we can try and grab a look from up above. Oh, you can see into the braking zone. They were already going 3 wide. And there's the initial sort of concertina, and bang from behind they went. And you can see up in front, 1, 2, and 3 cars all askew off the track. And then the parking lot and the inevitable results, the jam that was formed. It was the 917 of Scott Bowers that really got the worst of it, and what I must say is one of the more interesting liveries on the grid.
Indeed, there's a nice selection of paints here on the sim at the moment in this session. Very colourful field indeed. We have plenty of the default plaid livery Porsches out there, which I don't think is too bad of a livery, but when they've decided to make a custom one, they've certainly done it very nicely. Seems pretty... Oh yeah, that's what happened to Albano there, just getting into the back of the car in front and spinning around. Fortunately, this newer scan of Watkins Glen includes tarmac runoffs, so he was able to get away with that.
Plenty of the tarmac runoff as well. I think that's the important thing, and so as we check back in with those at the front, Enrico Gregorato is in that 771 and only 0.6 off the back of the Kennedy-powered machine of Mark Nister. Now, Reese, did you see Barbie or did you see Oppenheimer first?
I saw Barbie, but we did see Oppenheimer the week after and very much enjoyed it. Looked like Matt Siddle was the one spinning off there at the chicane as our leaders are already in a little bit of lap traffic. Enrico Gregorato still staying within the touch of Mark Nister at the front of the field. But I get the feeling Nister is starting to pull away. Remember, the slipstream starts taking effect from about 1.5 seconds back. So I think if Enrico wants a chance, he's going to have to pick up the pace a little.
And you got to wonder as well with that one pit stop, the drivers are going to get the opportunity to push the tires quite hard either side of that with the cool conditions that we have. And so how much they really need to back off at this layout and how early can they afford to get on the power through plenty of those traction zones, including, for example, out of the 90. You mentioned that traffic seems to be a factor for the leaders. It's going to be quite inevitable from this point forward, but it's one of the interesting things about this Porsche Club of America sim racing program. It caters to so many different levels, and anyone is welcome here, and that includes going to some of those arrive and drive events, which are basically track days, but on the sim race.
Yeah, very nice to see that the Porsche Club of America is so involved in sim racing, and there's plenty of people about who own Porsches and sim race. It's really nice to see the support. I'd noticed that Marc Lecombe was falling down the order. It looks like he got a helping of oversteer through the second last corner and unfortunately spun himself around. No one involved in that though. He's fallen down from 24th all the way down to 43rd, and from what I can see, there are still 45 cars on the lead lap.
Attrition hasn't been too bad so far. Now the drivers do get one fast repair in this race, so it's something that they can use to pick up some of that damage and effectively grab a fresh race car and head back out there. Traffic's going to be something that maybe splits Nister and Gregorato in towards the inner loop rather, and that's going to actually be a factor. Nister makes some contact. Gregorato's going to be able to squeeze his way on through. There's the big smash as Ed Eisenring had nowhere to go.
Oh, that is brutal there for Mark Nister. Pole position, and unfortunately lapped traffic has completely ruined his race, and it looks like that car is heavily damaged right now. That's a real shame for him. Enrico Gregorato, though, through to the lead of the race, but the checkup that he had to make means that Chris Braun is now within half a second of him. That's what it looked like on the replay for Nister.
And just wait for that.
Nothing you can do there.
Got to wonder as well on that initial dive, though. Could he have maybe backed out of it and not tried to make that second dive when he realized the lap car wasn't going to facilitate the pass? It's just an unfortunate situation, to be fair. And then Paul Rexy, the orange front nose of the iRacing tribute liveried machines, got a bit of a whack on the way on forward. So here's a look at Dean Chapman, who's being chased down by James Hoof in the all-black Porsche 992 Generation GT3 machine, and you're right. Chris Braun has closed the gap at the front, but interestingly, he had also punched in the fastest lap of the race not too long ago.
Yeah, he certainly had. It's very interesting pace from Chris Braun right now. And they have to keep an eye out for James Franznik and Peter Kummer in third and fourth. They are drafting with each other and trying their best to catch up here. Beautiful stuff watching the onboards here. Braun qualifying in fifth spot. And I think one thing that I've noticed at Watkins Glen is the starting position is basically irrelevant. You have so much happening, so much potential for big crashes, so much potential for slipstreaming that you see drivers making big moves up through the field. Right now, most positions gained is 24, and that belongs to John Gibson down in 17th.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about during qualifying, right? It's not important exactly where you qualify to the race result. It more just dictates where you're going to be in terms of all the action. Being at the front, yes, is always better, but it's not always a guarantee that you'll get through cleanly. So this is the brawl for 15th on back. Oh, look at that big send down to the inside from Kevin Yokel. Yeah. It's going to open him up to a bit of a run from Damon Fairbairn, James Legault, as you get this draft that builds up through the running towards the inner loop. That's a wonderfully liveried Porsche 992 as well. I got to say, the more we look through the field, the more interesting you can see some of these paint schemes go. But Fairbairn with the inside overlap, and now the chance to slide on through.
Oh, he has to back out of it, though. Yokel absolutely firing it into the corner, and he wants the position over John Gibson right now, who started outside the top 40. He's had a very safe and clean race so far, but if you're in the middle of a battle pack, I would say the stress levels are rising.
I would assume so, and the other thing about this particular layout, when we don't dive down into the boot, you lose some opportunities to relax because you're basically just going from corner to corner to corner and trying to focus on the draft, where you need to go. And the reason why I brought up pit entry is you see it off to the right-hand side on the onboard look with Derek Dirksen. If you're in a battle pack and you want to come down to pit lane, Reese, you better hope you are communicating with the body language of the car effectively.
Yeah, pit lane entry on the inside of the final corner, and you got to start slowing down at the apex to really get in there if you don't want a pit lane speeding penalty on the way in. So that's something that they'll have to drive with their eyes on stalks for. The battle for the lead's still ongoing here, and it looks like Chris Braun has managed to catch up a little bit more to Enrico Gregorato here. They are on their lonesome in the top two at the front of this field. They are a solid 5 seconds ahead of the battle for third and 9 seconds ahead of the battle for 5th to 11th.
Down the hill they go, and they are, like you mentioned, building that gap. Franznik more now. Being hunted down by the first of the PCA club drivers, denoted by the orange on the left-hand side of the screen. Again, just a reminder that the drivers classified in the championship and in points just in their class, but you're fighting on track and with everyone out there together, and you need to make sure that you hopefully will stay out of trouble. And speaking of Porsches and iRacing in particular, that's a bit of a bobble through the grass there just in front of this fight for third position. Hopefully not going to potentially overlap them there. iRacing announcing yesterday that someone in particular that we've seen plenty of in the sim racing world will be joining them in a Porsche GT3 for 2024. Lauren Heinrichs coming over to race in America, Reese.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. Very interesting bit of news there.
We're seeing Lauren in the IMSA Esports Global Championship. He races with VRS Coanda in that, but we've seen him even before that part of BS competition and so many other places his sim racing credentials have been built. Can't wait to cheer him on. Oh, look at this fight though. Fifth on back, Dean Chapman leads the gaggle down out of the 90 in the Team 75 Verno livery that's been running in DTM, of course, to pay tribute to 75 years of Porsche. Up they go. The likes of Chad Dick looking to try and slide their way on forward, but looks like the 12, the all black of Jim Huth, that's going to be the closest to try and look to the inside of Michael Patterson in what is a battle between two of the PCA Pro machines.
A very intense battle indeed. Who gets the best exit out of the carousel here? This beautiful long right-hander coming down the hill. I love the dip that you go through on the exit. You can really get a good launch out of this corner if you play your cards right. Not much of an overtaking opportunity at this corner, or the last corner even, but if you get the traction right, if you carry the momentum through the corner, you'll be able to have a run into the first turn. But if you're in a pack like this, around such a high average speed circuit, do you want to go for those moves? Do you want to be the car at the front of the pack?
You might not want to be at the very front, but you get the sneaking suspicion that James Huth would not mind sneaking past Patterson and at least putting himself in a slightly better spot when it comes to diving down in towards the pit lane. Now, these drivers aren't fighting in terms of championship for anything in particular other than bragging rights. There is a prize, though, a Princess Cruise 7-day cruise for any driver that competes in a single race and participates in enough laps. You can earn additional entries by completing more races over the course of the season, and just by, of course, being part of the Porsche Club of America and participating in the sim racing program. So many different things that you can do over the course of a calendar year. And it's a nice little way for these drivers to do some battle. That was Chad Dick in the 930 with a bit of a look to the inside of Kim Frick. But like Reese mentions, you've got to be careful going for lunges here, and at least so far, none of these drivers are willing to go for anything.
Yeah, it's, oh, there was a crash in the background I just saw at the final corner. A couple of cars involved in that. Jason Finch and Gabriel Albano. Unfortunately, Albano has out of the running for the time being.
Oh.
Looks like a coming together between him and Tamer Albaga.
And I think Jason Finch is also going to be out of the running because there is decidedly no rear wing on that car anymore.
No, I mean, that's certainly still a very pretty looking car, but you need that rear downforce.
Oof.
There's the contact that started it, bit of a bump in the final corner, and then, that's what took the other car out. That's the problem with a lot of these corners here. They're blind on the way through. If there's a car spun in front of you, yes, you get the yellow flag warning from the spotter and a car stopped, verbal warning, but you don't really get much warning.
There's another car off there at the final corner, so a bit of skittles around Watkins Glen with almost half of this 40-minute race complete, 53 started, and we are starting to see some level of attrition. At least 2 have completely retired, maybe a couple more on pit lane awaiting some significant repairs. Your front 2, though, continue to extend the advantage, and because these drivers are limited to 50% fuel, Reese, we're talking about a maximum realistic run time of about 30 minutes for the drivers, and so we're only about 13 minutes away from seeing the drivers forced down onto the lane.
Yeah, and is there anyone who's going to be brave and try to pit early? It looks like Jason Finch is going to jump in, though I think he might be one of the cars that we saw damaged just a few moments ago. Yes, indeed. Okay, so that's not a scheduled pit stop for Jason Finch. Now, the question is, when do you pit? Because you got to think about where you're going to come out. You want someone to slipstream with, but you don't want to be held up by traffic. I think if you're up the front of the field, you want to try and stretch the tank out as much as possible, run long, and pit at the last available opportunity. If you're down in the field, maybe you can gain by pitting earlier.
I'm always someone that likes to just try and run the car as dry as possible before I come in. But that's mostly because I like to try and put in as little fuel as possible, and that means you have a little bit more confidence in the margin that you need to leave for yourself, and so that's one thing that maybe some drivers will be keeping in mind. Kim Frick, the sole Porsche Club driver in the middle of the Porsche Pro swarm right now. Patterson and Huth in front, Dick behind, of course, with Matson and then Hall lurking dangerously in the background as well. The one thing that you mentioned right about, the way that some of these corners are blind, the fact that we have the inner loop is actually a bit of a benefit as well, because if you take out that chicane and you just run full bore up into the outer loop, there's this nasty bump race in the crest where if you bounce over it wrong, you could very well end up in the wall.
Yeah, don't worry. I've certainly experienced that quite a few times when I've been racing on the sim. So I think the drivers will be grateful that they aren't having to deal with that. Of course, they've got their own bumps to deal with in the form of those gigantic curbs at the chicane. I mean, the GT3 machinery deals with it a bit better than, say, GTP or open wheelers, but still, it's a little bit unsettled, and if you don't run the curbs right, you won't get the best line through the corner. That is someone spun at pit exit, unfortunately.
I believe
like that was Lisa Eskridge. Indeed.
It looks like the similar livery to Mark Nister, the pole position winner, so for a second I was like, no, not more drama for him, but yes. Have you noticed, by the way, as big swarms and gaggles in towards the inner loop, that Kim Frick, Paddy Patterson almost overlap? Gap between Chris Braun and James Franznik came down slightly a couple of laps ago, so traffic's starting to play its part as it becomes even more frenetic around the track.
Yeah, indeed. Franznik is currently dealing with some traffic at the moment. He made his way past Jeff Lashway, and meanwhile, this battle, Patterson, Frick, Dick, and Matson, they're running nicely. Little bit of an unsettled moment for Chad Dick. Let's see who gets the best exit out of the final corner here. Looks like Kim Frick didn't quite pull it up. Oh, okay, here we go. Chris Braun coming into the pit lane from second spot. Mike Matson following him in. That's an interesting call there as Frick goes for the move in the S's on Paddy Patterson. Patterson with the outside line becomes the inside for turn 3. This is going to be interesting. They're losing time now. They're both punching their own independent hole through the air, and Chad Dick, if he's brave, might make it 3 wide.
And it's a crucial time because if cars are down on pit lane, this fighting could compromise them. And no real offense, and Frick slightly cuts the second part of the inner loop. Hopefully that's not going to be a potential slowdown there. Because all that fighting has allowed James Huth to slightly stretch away and try and close on Dean Chapman, and indeed what is now a fight for 3rd position overall, but just net, of course, with drivers down on the pit lane. Let's see if anyone else follows, though. Chris Braun for the Curious, 12.5 seconds stationary in the box.
Yes, that's a pretty good pit stop considering what we've seen so far. In comes Peter Kummer and Jim Huth. And following them in going to be Jeremy Hall and Mark Rondo. That's another name that I recognize from my many exploits over the past couple of years. What can Jeremy Hall do from 9th spot? It's a long pit lane at Watkins Glen, and the pit speed limit is only somewhere along the line of 64 k's an hour. Considering how fast this track is, you do tend to lose a lot of time pitting, so you need to nail the entry and the exit to lose as little time as possible.
And it's so important on the entry to really just understand and hope that you don't have drivers coming up behind you, and if you do, how to compromise yourself least while being safe down onto the lane. So these drivers still out there on track, but there's been more dramas for some in what has been a somewhat attrition-heavy race, but drivers taking advantage of the sole fast repair that they have. Russell Elizondo, just through the penultimate corner, back end comes around, and a sympathy spin behind as well for the 42.
Woo! That was very close there.
Moses.
Huh.
Right
yeah,
down
part the Red
middle.
Sea.
I mean,
goodness gracious.
I was at Prodigy Week a few weeks ago, and I was listening to a story that Brian Till was telling me about a sim racer who had gone and done some real racing, and basically, ARCA brakes. For those that don't know what ARCA brake means, a big crash in front of you, wall of smoke, the guy didn't lift, went through it full throttle, and somehow came out of it without any scratch, and didn't spin, whatever. And basically what happened in the pit lane after that is a bunch of people went over to him and said, if you ever do that again, you're going to hurt somebody.
Yeah. I mean, there's not many consequences in the sim world, but you try and do it in real life, then you are certainly going to draw the ire of those around you. There's more than just your race on the line when you're racing in meat space, as it were.
I'm going to steal that line, meat space.
It's an old internet term from a long time back. Yeah, I think it dates from like Usenet boards or something like that. But everything old is new again at some point.
The OG days of the internet. Back up to the front to check in, not just with James Franznik, but with Enrico Gregorato as well. Now, after Chris Braun has come down the pit lane, Braun has found some clean air. Lap times last time by actually saw the 258 have a almost 0.8 of a second advantage, and this is where the traffic is going to be so important. An undercut versus an overcut, we're not talking about that in terms of strategy per se here today. Instead, we're just talking about how much time can these drivers avoid losing in the midst of traffic.
Yeah, well, Enrico is facing off against 2 examples of traffic there. John Gibson lets him go nicely into the final couple of corners, but Art Schwartz there is going to take a little bit more time to catch up. And Enrico is going to stay out of the pits for another lap. He's going to try and draw this one out as much as possible. Daynan Fairburn is going to jump into the lane, and looks like that's a bit of a long pit stop for Fairburn, coming up to 20 seconds stationary in the box. We are seeing pit stop times run the gamut of about 12.5 to 13.5 seconds for pit stops that go smoothly. That's
the thing as well, right? It's not just about the pit stop going smoothly, but you have to get into your box smoothly as well here on iRacing. You go a little bit deep and have to back up. That will cost you some time as well. Even just sliding a bit further from the optimal mark on the jacks will find yourself often just with a slightly longer pit stop. And as some drivers have been quick to realize, iRacing even simulates the amount of time it takes for the pit crew to run around the car if you want to change left side tires versus right side tires, depending on which side the pit wall is on the car. So all these unique things come into play, but 5 minutes away from drivers having to come down to pit lane surely because they're about to run out of fuel. The 771 continues to chart its path out there on track. Chris Braun is finally, by the way, starting to encounter some actual traffic of drivers who haven't pitted and are still technically out there and running up in the top 10.
Yeah, catching up to Duncan James there, just up ahead of him. Oh, I've just noticed a bit of a pile-up coming out of turn 1. Ward Preston, one of the cars involved in that. Also seeing David Glen and Patrick Gill, unfortunately. Gill stopped at pit exit. Looked like there was a bit of a problem between those two cars. We'll see it here coming out. Yeah, oh, that's very unfortunate. Coming out of the pits and noticing two cars stopped in front of you. And not only that, but that driver will get an unsafe pit exit as well because they had to blend onto the racetrack before the blue cone.
I think that's the least of the worries, to be fair, given that the bonk at the front end probably did a bit of damage to the steering, all things considered. So more pit stops now complete, James. Franznik has cycled into the box and finished his cycle up. 14-second stop for him, so a little bit longer. Chris Braun is still being frustrated by Duncan James as finally Enrico Gregorato comes down and is going to roll his way down the box. Finally, the pit stop cycle seemingly coming to a close, but as Chris Braun continues to lose time, Reese, this is the crucial time in this pit window.
Yeah, Enrico Gregorato has had pretty good luck with traffic so far. He hasn't lost much time out on the circuit, but conversely, I don't think he's had as many opportunities for slipstreaming as Chris Braun has had. So let's see what the pit stop is like for Enrico as Braun is coming into the final corner now. Remember, 13 seconds to get the fuel in there. Gregorato just reaches that now, 13.0, and it's going to be close here, with Chris Braun making his way into turn 1, and Gregorato is going to come out just ahead of him, but the momentum is with Braun out of the first turn.
And how are they going to rise up in through turn 1 with that traffic up ahead, still feeding the draft? Braun's going to slightly etch himself away, but it's not done and dusted by any means. Gregorato will get his tires back up into the window, and we did see him up on the jack, so he's going to make sure that car gets back into its optimal balance. Braun is going to bully his way past Duncan James up the inside of the inner loop, and now we'll try to press the advantage. It's already up to a second and growing out through the long right-hander.
Yeah, now Gregorato has to deal with the traffic of Duncan James, but can sit behind him and get a little bit more speed coming down this straight. And yes, he did take tyres, and you can do that without losing time. Pit stops are run to IMSA rules, which means that the... oh, dearie me. Car spun there, James Legault. Fuel and tyres are done at the same time, and unfortunately, that's going to be the least of Duncan James's worries, as we just saw. Gregorato getting into him at the final turn. That's exactly what we were talking about earlier, Arjuna. You're slowing down for the pits, and there's a car right behind you. You're going to get whacked.
Sometimes commentators know what we're talking about. And talking about pit stops, it's not just the entry that's an issue. The exit can be of worries as well, and I don't quite know how they managed to do that, but... yeah, that's somewhat unfortunate, all things considered, for a couple of drivers to spin things around. And now it is only a couple of drivers still waiting to finish up the cycle that roll out of the pit box that have finished things up. Chad Dick amongst the last of them, and he's jumped a whole host of cars as a result of his pit stop cycle. He's up into 6th in front of Chapman and Frick as a result.
Yep, 11 spots gained. Nicely done there. Paddy Patterson visiting the pits for the second time, and I would assume that there was a... Patterson has a black flag. I get the feeling Patterson was the car that we saw recovering after that contact coming out of pit lane. Would have got an unsafe pit exit penalty, so has to come back into the pits and serve that. Very unfortunate. We still have 26 cars on the lead lap here, and my goodness, that's looking messy back in the pack. But Chris Braun currently a lead of 2.3 seconds over Enrico Gregorato with that little run-in that Gregorato had in the final turn a lap ago. So all Chris Braun has to do now is just manage the pace, make sure that he doesn't lose too much time in traffic, and hope that Enrico Gregorato doesn't get a big draft run.
He's kept his car pretty clean as well, and so that's the important thing. Even if traffic bobbles in front of him, he's got the opportunity to just let himself back off a little bit and get past cleanly. These drivers don't have that same luxury, though. It is a fight for 5th position. The first of the PCA club cars, Peter Cummer in the 333, is trying to hold off Chad Dick, Dean Chapman, Kim Frick, and a whole bunch more as they all overlap with various bits of lap traffic. Long right-hand sweeper carries them back, not down to the boot, but instead in towards the final couple of corners on the lap, and this is where traffic becomes so dangerous. iRacing makes it easier, though. You get this wonderful thing called an F3 box that tells you who you're fighting with on track and who you're fighting with in terms of traffic.
Yeah, but of course there's plenty of people out there who don't know that exists, as we have all experienced at one point or another.
Not too true, but these two, through that traffic, have found themselves a little bit separated from Chad Dick in front, so Kim Frick is going to really pinch Dean Chapman down through the 90, but doesn't take advantage on corner exit.
Yeah, a little bit too slow of a speed at the apex, so unfortunately that's some momentum lost on corner exit at turn 1, which is probably the most important acceleration zone on the entire track, because you're flat out all the way up through the S's, and you're able to get a run off the car behind as Mike Matson gets past Derek Dirksen. That is traffic there. They are not directly racing with each other, but Matson getting an advantage over Kim Frick here. This is going to be interesting for them coming into the final 8 minutes of this race.
We are bang on cue to get 36 laps, it would seem, under our belts, given the pace that has been run up towards the front. A cycle back to Joachim Bakker alongside with Kevin Yokel as Yokel cycles on through on the all-black machine. The green numbered Yokel indicates that he is part of the PCA Sport class, and he's currently running 3rd in that category. And so as the points are running, it's 25 points for a victory, 21 points for 2nd in class, 18 points for a podium, 17 points, and then 1 point down from further back. So there is plenty to play for some of these drivers. Not sure exactly how you get past on the run in towards the S's, but Chad Dick's been able to get past Peter Cummer. I get the sense that Dean Chapman, Kim Frick, and Mike Matson are about to battle up in towards the inner loop.
Yep, Lisa Eskridge and Antonio De Silva were very close to each other through the S's, and that slowed them up. It gave the advantage to Chapman, Frick, and Matson. Chapman successful at getting past into the inner loop, and now Eskridge. You can see that there was a bit of a concertina effect there. I'm seeing smoke. Oh dear. Well, looks like whoever it was has escaped off the circuit, though I do see a stray bumper there on the left side, from our view at least.
There has, like I said earlier, plenty of business for the Porsche spare parts department after this one, although it's not the type of expense, fortunately, that we saw like at Rennsport Reunion earlier this year, where I think it was either a pair of 917s or 962s that came to blows. That was just a poor run off the corner for the 333. Chad Dick straight up the inside and did not need a second invitation to grab 5th overall, and a crucial position to potentially just give himself a little bit more comfort as they would fight behind for the rest of the PCA club category. So 6.5 odd minutes to go. Chris Braun's about to head to the line to check off at lap 29 of this race, and the gap to Enrico Gregorato it's holding steady at about 2.5 seconds.
Yeah, and Gregorato won't be a big fan of that. He's not getting offered many opportunities for slipstreaming. Jack Stevenson jumps right out of the way of our 2nd place runner, but now there's nothing between them on the track, and the next bit of traffic is Andrew Elsom, who's running in 20th place. So there's potential here for Gregorato to make up some time. What he needs to focus on is nailing the inner and outer loops. Those are really the only corners before you get to the final 2 where you can afford to make up some time, a little bit more space for running through those corners. But at the start of the lap, coming through the S's, basically it's defined by your exit from turn 1. But Braun is in control of this race, and you can see he's not really pushing hard at all. He's just maintaining that pace right now.
The interesting thing, just watching him through the inner loop as well, was how he managed the gearing. It was down to 4th for a second, back up to 5th to manage the wheel spin out of the inner loop, and back down to 4th through the outer loop just to slow the car down again. Just in control, not pushing too hard, and As mentioned earlier, open setup competition means that these drivers can dial in the amount of downforce that they want, and with this particular configuration, you'd have to assume as little downforce as you could potentially get away with. The fight for 11th has seen John Gibson run a little bit wide. Behind traffic's going to close on up as Matthew Yokel breaks away and runs his way a little bit wide. Track limit's not a concern around the track, but 5 minutes to go, and there's still some battles to run our way on through. Tires will be something that race drivers will have had to save over the course of an hour, because even though you can change tires and fuel at the same time, now you can only probably do 1 or 2 at most.
Yeah, exactly. And which tires do you go for? You know, you'd assume the rears because, well, it's a rear-wheel drive car, but then you could also go left side tires because most of the corners here are right-handers. Or do you go for the fronts to get that turn in? That's the big issue that the drivers are facing. And right now, Peter Kummer versus Chad Dick for 5th spot. Chad took that move very nicely a few moments before, but Kummer is not letting him get away.
No, and the problem with this as well is you can see that Dean Chapman's closed in behind, so for Peter Kummer in particular, he'll be thinking that the battle for the class victory is very much up for grabs, and he'll be hoping that Chad Dick can play nice and potentially give some slipstream. 4 points the difference between first and second in the class, and again, there's no real championship prize to speak of. It's just bragging rights. Everyone that finishes the race is part of the Porsche Club of America, finishes no more than 3 laps behind the overall winner, is eligible to be part of the grand draw for a 7-day cruise with Princess Cruises on their Caribbean and Mexican Riviera voyages. That sounds like a nice way to potentially spend what might be a cool winter, getting just a little bit warmer. No move into the inner loop, though. That's a mistake from Chad Dick. Or is that just the line that they take? Such an interesting line that they all run.
Yeah, it's one of those sequences where there's multiple lines through it and pretty much all are correct. Dick, I think, just slowing things down a little bit more at the middle of the corner, take a bit more out of the inside. Meanwhile, Kummer was going harder in and taking a wider line through the corner for a better exit. It seems that that momentum that he built up had worked out for him coming down the back straight. Chad Dick then starting to look over his shoulder. One more pit stop for Derek Dirksen meanwhile. These guys are not worried about that though. And I mean, Chad Dick, he's obviously 5th place, wants to chase down 4th, but Jim Huth is just too far ahead of him right now. Looks like about 7.2 seconds is the margin that Chad is dealing with. So unfortunately, this is the battle that he has to focus on. He has to stay ahead of Peter Kummer.
So Chad is unfortunately just dealing with the aftermath of a relatively poor qualifying performance, but at the same time, James was able to break out in the early stage and not get caught up in the battle of your PCA club drivers, and he was able to latch on a little bit closer to the back of James Franznik, but not really able to take advantage of that. Enrico Gregorato has brought the gap down at the front slightly, but not really to a close enough margin where it's going to be a significant factor even with 2 laps to go. And so instead, on board with Dean Chapman, big send into the final corner, and he said Chad Dick's looking over the shoulder. I've got to assume Peter Kummer's looking over the shoulder even more.
Yeah, let's see what the exit is like from the first turn. Then you can see that Dean is starting to go a little bit harder into the corners here, and he's relying on the front end of that car to take him through it. He's close enough for a move into the inner loop now in the middle of this lap. He just needs to set it up, stick behind the blue Porsche up ahead, and immediately Kummer going defensive. There's no chance for Dean Chapman to make his way through here unless he absolutely dives on the brakes, and, well, he lets him go, and the battle will continue here. But look at that, slow in, fast out. That's the mantra, and Dean Chapman made it work for him right there.
It's all, though, about the draft, and now a bit of a separation building up towards the front as that gap opens up to Chad Dick. White flag will be in hand, though, as Barney the flagman signals final lap of this race, as Chris Braun continues to run to the front, but only 1.7 seconds clear of Enrico Gregorato. So, Focus up towards this battle though, because Peter Cummer, Dean Chapman are fighting for top honors in the PCA Club class, and Chad Dick's got a bit of a buffer into turn number 1. The look to the inside from Chapman.
And move up the inside, room given by Peter Cummer, and the outside line will work for him there. That was a good bit of racing between those two. They don't want to run into each other and risk losing their class podium positions.
Up the hill though, this is where, if Dean Chapman can get a good run, he can potentially just bring his speed back up towards the line. Still has those runs into the penultimate corner, potentially into the final corner to spring a surprise, but it's going to have to be a desperation lunge, and Chris Braun has ensured there will be no such moves at the front. Victorious in round 4 of the 2023 PCA Sunset Cruise at Watkins Glen, and coming out on top in a battle against Enrico Gregorato that involves strategy plays as well. James Franznik will grab the final step of the podium, just clear of James Huth, but if we cycle back over to the PCA Club battle, Peter Cummer does just enough to use the draft of Chad Dick to grab the victory in front of Dean Chapman. What a wonderful race it's been, and still a couple more winners to come across the line.
Yeah, it looks like Jeremy Hall's going to be the one to take victory in the sport class across the line, and he's got plenty of space back to John Gibson. Beautiful drive there from Hall, who started in 21st overall to get into the top 10. Beautiful.
Not even quite sure exactly who's going to grab the victory in the PCA Challenge class, but such a tumultuous round. I think it's good to see that still plenty of the drivers finish using their fast repair to good advice from the crew down on the pit lane and working their way around. There is Chris Braun and Enrico Gregorato. I think ultimately a difference maker was the call from Chris Braun to come down to the pit lane and get his tires into the window. And once Gregorato came out, yes, he was alongside, but it took a crucial couple of laps for him to get back up to speed.
Yeah, and you got to think about difference in momentum as well, being out on track as the driver you're battling with is coming out of pit lane. They are compromised, and I tell you what, it was a fantastic drive from Braun from 5th to 1st, but I'd say Enrico Gregorato, a consistent finish. Started 2nd and finished 2nd, so he definitely has a lot to be happy about here tonight.
And I think, like you said, a lot to be happy about, and stayed out of trouble even when trouble tried to find him slightly earlier on. So they complete their full pace lap down to the pit lane. Now let's take a look at the race results. Every driver, of course, in an identical Porsche 992 car, but with the ability to tweak the setup. And in your PCA Pro class, it's Chris Braun that comes out on top, 1.7 seconds clear of Enrico Gregorato. James Franznik and then James Huth and Chad Dick, the rest of your top 5. Before we get down to the first of the PCA Club drivers, Peter Cummer finishes in front of Dean Chapman, but just by about 0.6 of a second, while Kim Frick and Mike Matson make up the rest of the top 4. 10th overall, but first for the PCA Sport class, in the case of the 43 of Jeremy Hall. 11th, the way of Sean Murphy, with Matthew Yokel behind, John Gibson, Kevin Yokel, Joachim Backer, Duncan James, Mike Saxteen, Adam Geerling, Ben Lung, and then Andrew Elsom through the rest of your top 20 with a good almost full lap through those drivers. And then Terrace Tong, the first driver, 1 lap down, along with Scott Bowers, Ward Preston, Mark Nister, of course, from pole position, drops down to 24th. Carl Bakary, Lee Binkley, Charlie Ferrer, Antonio Da Silva, Kenneth Eskridge, and then Mark Rondo make up the rest of the top 30. Michael Patterson, Matthew Siddle, James Legault, and then Johan Nye is your first PCA Challenge driver, all the way down in 34th position, but in front of Danon Fairbairn, Arthur Schwartz, Jack Stevenson, Ed Eisenring, and then Lisa Eskridge, with Derek Dirksen making up the 40th position in the results. And we're still going, and this is where we get into the used car lot. Mark Lacombe, Patrick Gill, David Glen, Russell Elizondo, Casey McDonald, Curtis Crummell, Jeff Lashway, Jason Finch, Gabriel Urbano, and then Lyle Eddy, and still more cars to come. Robert Neville, Tamar Elbaga, and Rodney Campbell make up the rest of the 53 starters, and not all of them, of course, getting very far into this race. Now, This was the 4th round of the championship for these drivers, the first round that we got to see them out in action, but they'll be rolling on 2 weeks from today. They'll make their way over to America's National Park of Speed, and I can't wait to see how they go, but we'll be watching on from a distance, Reese, to see how they fare.
Absolutely. Road America is a fantastic circuit, and I always like watching GT racing around there. It's somewhat similar to Watkins Glen in terms of dependence on the slipstream, but plenty of heavy braking zones and quite a few more corners where there's a very little margin for error. I'm looking forward to that.
It's going to be a lot of fun, and what is a fun calendar for the 2023 Sunset Cruise 2. It all started at Road Atlanta, Circuit of the Americas, Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, and Sebring to round it all off. And of course, there's still plenty more to come in the world of Porsche Club of America sim racing, where the cars aren't real, but the racing is. And boy, Reese, we saw plenty of racing here today at Watkins Glen, and unfortunately a little bit of bowling as well on the opening laps.
Yeah, we did. It's unfortunate for the drivers involved in that, but hey, it comes with the territory, right? A 50-plus car grid at such a fast and short circuit, you're always going to see some drama, but fortunately we did see plenty of drivers escape that.
Plenty of drivers escape, some good racing after that as well, but it's time to say goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us here for round 4 of the 2023 Porsche Club of America Sunset Cruise 2 here on RaceSpotTV. For the entire team behind the scenes, for Reese Gardner alongside myself, Arjuna Kankipati, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time here for some more great sim racing action.